Now, coming out of a perception survey that the Ministry of Labour would have held, numerous reports of child working would have come out of that report. And so we wanted to check in with the Ministry of Labour, the inspectorate particularly, to find out exactly how, what the information coming out of this survey was and how are we going to be monitoring these reports of child labour. And so joining us this morning, we have the Chief Labour Inspector, Specialist Mr. Farouk Mohammed, and also a psychologist at the Children's Authority, Ms. Ahelia Ramdas. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us on Now.
Good morning, and thank you.
Now, Mr. Mohammed, I'm going to start with you first because that perception survey that was done, can you share some more details in terms of what the findings would have been?
Yes, so recently we conducted through our communications unit a perception survey through social media. And we developed a set of questions basically to get a sense of what is the perception out there from the members of the public as it relates to children working, child labor, etc. And coming out of that, we got approximately 90 reports of child labor across the country. From those 90 reports, when we looked at them, we recognized that there were 34 cases that had sufficient information for us to follow up. So while some of the others were vague, we will still be looking at sending inspectors out to those particular areas just to do some general observations to follow up. But definitely these 34 cases that we have specific information, location, etc. We are putting things in place to follow up in these cases.
Right. Now, the 34 cases that you mentioned, Mr. Mohammed, when you say that you're going to be putting things in place, can you share some more information about that in terms of, is it that you're going to have conversation with the families? Is it that the children will be able to return to school? I mean, what will be put in place to address the issue?
Right, so we're setting up teams of inspectors to go out to these different locations to gather the information. Now, these are reports of suspected cases of child labor, so we need to investigate to verify, to determine if it's actually cases of child labor. So inspectors would be deployed to gather information. They would be interviewing the child, interviewing the parent or guardian, relatives, interviewing the employer if it's a separate employer from the parent or the family. And based on the information we gather, we assess that information. And our first attempt is to have the child removed from that labor environment. So there may be underlying issues involved. The child may not be attending school and working. The family may have vulnerability issues, economic issues that we would need to refer to the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services for follow-up action to see what sort of social programs are available to those children and their families. If they're out of school, definitely we would want to refer those cases to the Ministry of Education to some sort of a follow-up action. One of our critical stakeholders is the Children's Authority, who have responsibility for the overall care and protection of children in Trinidad and Tobago. So those are some of the steps we would take to address those cases.
Right. And Ms. Ramdas, I want to bring you in here as a psychologist because I'm trying to figure out exactly for a child who is, let's say, pulled out of school and is forced in some instances to go to work at such a young age, what are some of the effects this is going to have on that child?
Okay, so first of all, we must appreciate that under the definition of what child labor is, it basically undermines child rights and undermines what they're entitled to as children. So according to the International Labour Organization, child labor is work that deprives a child, which is anyone under the age of 18, of their childhood, their potential, their dignity, or that is harmful to them, right? Their physical well-being, their mental well-being. UNICEF touches on deprivation of playtime, which is a right for children, right? The right to play and leisure, and the deprivation of education, right? So we know that in Trinidad and Tobago, all children between the ages of 5 and 16 are mandated to access to education, to be in school, right? Whether or not it's in a formal education setting, whether or not you're going to go the homeschool route, right? And I want to stress that is a formal process for homeschooling. It's not just about keeping your children at home. So child labor undermines the basic rights of a child. And as the Children's Authority, we are charged with the protection of children where it concerns neglect and abuse, maltreatment on the whole. And child labor speaks to that. It speaks to neglect and it speaks to maltreatment because we know that child labor delves into the realm of exploitation
Right.
concerning their general mental well-being. Forcing a child to work puts undue stress on that child. It places them in a position of responsibility that they are not yet equipped to deal with psychologically, and it is depriving them of key childhood experiences that allow for the further development of skills that are required into adulthood for them to become fully functional, and self-regulated, emotionally regulated adults. So, I mean, it does have a very serious impact on children.
Right. Now, I'm coming back to you, Mr. Mohammed, only because I wanted to bring the law in as part of the Children's Act, Chapter 4601, where it states that a child under the age of 16 years shall not be employed to work in any public or private undertaking other than an undertaking owned and controlled by family members. So then if the child is working as part of a family business, is that then allowed, or are there certain rules that they must abide by as well?
Yeah, so Trinidad and Tobago has declared 16 years as the minimum age for employment, and this is in line with the Education Act, where it is mandatory for a child 5 to 15 to be in school. So it allows for a child under the age of 16 to be employed in certain situations, for example, in the family business, where only members of the family are present. But it must not impact on their education. It must not affect their ability to do their homework, to play, to enjoy their childhood. And it should not be work that is strenuous or dangerous or harmful to the child. So they can function in those environments. In fact, there are some activities children can do, like, for example, chores around the home, helping in the family, maybe kitchen garden, for example, which are considered positive and helps prepare and build that child to be a contributing member of society in their adulthood. But it must not affect their education. They must be given every opportunity to reach their full potential when they become adults.
Right. Now, Mr. Mohammed, I'm trying to nail down exactly what it is because there's a fine line between business and working. So, for example, sometimes I would be on Ryson Road and I would see these young men walking and selling those bottles of water. Is that considered child labor, or would they be allowed to if it's a family business, or is it wrong if it's during school hours? I mean, the situation is very nuanced. So how do we know what is the situation of child labor and what is working for a family?
Right. So some of the indicators we would look for is it during school hours? Are they missing school? That's one. Are they exposed to any hazards? For example, they may be selling on the streets, walk, which is dangerous by itself, walking through, moving vehicles and selling these products. So that could be considered a hazardous form of child labor. They may be lifting heavy objects, for example, vegetables and other agricultural produce selling, uh, which are heavy for their age group and the frame of their body, etc., which can be strenuous to them. That's a sign of child labor as well. So they may be exposed to the elements, for example, the sun or rain, etc. Those are hazards as well too. So a child helping out a family, once it's maybe like on a Saturday weekend or during school vacation, in certain instances, it's okay. But there, as you said, there is a fine line, and we need to do the investigation, gather the information, do the assessment, see
Yeah.
where that line is crossed to determine whether those cases are actually child labor.
Right. Ms. Ramdas, I'm bringing you back in here because I wanted to know what services are available. So, for example, some of the reasons that children may be, for want of a better word, employed to assist their parents is because they have, maybe poverty in the family and that sort of thing. Are there services that they can go to where they can be able to get some help as it relates to their economic situation?
So, as it relates to poverty being the issue that leads children to working, I mean, there are always resources available through the Ministry of Social Development that families can seek help if it is economic in nature, the reason that they're there. But there are so many other reasons that children are forced into child labor, or that families require children to work. But once it is economic in nature, you can go to social development. There are, a lots of NGOs and these things that do have outreach programs that provide hampers and assistance with food, assistance with books and these things. And it's not always easy information to access. It's not always very public, but there are agencies. And if you go to social development, or even if you speak to persons at, let's say the social workers through Student Support Services and Ministry of Education, or you speak to the social workers at National Family Services, they are aware of all of these programs, all of these avenues where help can be accessed. So the key thing is then reaching out. I'm in this situation, and we all know that COVID-19 has exacerbated these conditions that existed prior to the pandemic. So the first step is that, okay, I'm in this position. I've lost work. I've been without work for X amount of time. We have this amount of debt accrued, and we need some help. The first step is seeking out help from the ministry, going to them saying, this is our position. What are the avenues available to us to get this help?
Yeah. Now, Ms. Ramdas, you raised a very important point in terms of there are other reasons why children may be forced into child labor. Can you just quickly share a few more of the instances where this may occur?
Okay. So, I mean, of course, poverty and socioeconomics is one of the leading reasons why this would occur. Another reason children are sometimes pulled into child labor is, let's say, they're going to school, they have academic troubles or challenges, and parents decide, well, school is not for you. I'm going to pull you out. I'm going to put you to work to make a contribution to the home instead, right? So that's also a reason. They feel school is not working out for them. They're not academically inclined. So let's just shuffle them into another area. But what we need to appreciate and understand is academic challenges does not equate to the need for a child to be pulled out of formal schooling. There are avenues for children to learn a trade, learn a skill. You can refer to Student Support Services to be properly assessed to get to the root of why are we having academic challenges, and then trying to intervene, trying to provide the right interventions to help that child, again, have the opportunities to reach their full potential. Human trafficking is also another reason why children get pulled into that labor force. It's whether or not it's not necessarily that the children are being forced by their parents or caregivers or being sold into labor for whatever reason. Sometimes children are picked up, abducted. We have the situation where we have refugees moving into countries, and because there are no formal avenues for them to get into school or formal avenues for persons to work, then sometimes they are exploited by local populations, whatever the country. So they're taken wholesale into things like the sex trade, into working in factories, working in mines, and all of these things. So all of those are contributing factors to why children end up in the workforce. And I just want to stress that in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Mohammed is mentioning 34 cases with enough details, 90 cases being reported from one survey. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a challenge where there's a lot of underreporting, because a lot of people still believe, well, that's not my business. I'm not going to say. And so it's a lot more prevalent than even this survey was able to highlight. And, just to stress that there are millions of children across the world that are forced into child labor. And because of the pandemic, we've set further back from eradicating child labor globally. And, it's a real problem. I know that sometimes family may think they have no choice. Another reason is, of course, tradition. So we have countries in the world, we have areas even within our country where they believe that it's the child's responsibility to continue working in the family business, or to continue doing a particular thing, whether it's working in agriculture, whether it's learning a particular trade that the family is known for. And it comes down to tradition.
Yeah.
So you're going to work because that's what our family has done for years.
Of course. Now, Ms. Ramdas, quickly, one of the things you mentioned is that underreporting. And so if somebody suspects that they may see a case of child labor, is there a number that they should reach out to? Should they contact the Children's Authority?
Well, because child labor does undermine the basic rights of a child, and it does lead to instances or situations where there's abuse, there's maltreatment, there's neglect. Take, for example, the same example you gave of young children on the streets selling water. That's supervisory neglect. Where's the adult present with a child with a child, which is anybody under 18, where's the adults present?
Yeah.
Why are they in the streets where they can be hit by a car, where they can be accosted by a stranger, abducted by a stranger? So you can contact the Children's Authority at 996 or 800-2014. You
Right.
can contact the police or the Child Protection Unit. And I'm not sure if Mr. Mohammed would be able to speak to if they are able to reach out to the Ministry of Labor directly concerning our reports.
Right. Now we have to go quickly, but Mr. Mohammed, this is your chance. Any numbers you want to leave with people who they can contact if they see any cases of child labor?
Yes, they can report it to us at 2990300, option 3. That's the Labor Inspectorate Unit, and they can reach out to other agencies like Childline, for example, and report these
Of
matters.
course. All right. Well, Mr. Mohammed and Ms. Ramdas, thank you so much for joining us on the Now Show and just sharing how we can look out for those cases of child labor that's happening across the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was Labor Inspector Specialist Mr. Farouk Mohammed and psychologist at the Children's Authority, Ms. Ahelia Ramdas, giving us some information about that perception survey. You're on the Now Morning Show. We're going to take a break and be right back. Stay with us.